Alright, well, let's just go for it. I've got everything kind of set up to explain this. So, first of all, we're going to be doing a camera system, and the way it's going to work is we're going to have a ball, we're going to have a camera that stares at this ball, right? And no matter how we rotate the camera, it's always going to be the same distance from the ball, which is called our zoom level in this case. So we can rotate it left, right, up, down, all those angles. And no matter how we rotate it, it's always going to be the same distance, which is zoom level. And we're going to set it to 8. We can have it adjusted by the player in game or in the settings or however we want. But we need it to rotate, and we need it to be simple. And we don't want it attached to the object, because that's just a hassle if you ask me. So what I've done is I've set up the player camera, I've set up a little player, and I gave him some sweet blue shades. And I've set things up so that this is like where the camera should start, right? It's going to be looking straight at the target. It's going to be the same height off the ground as the target, which it isn't for some reason. Oh wait, that was my target. My capsule wasn't the same height off the ground. That needs to be 1. Okay. It should actually be -7, I think. That would be -8 distance. Okay, so this player camera can now be, what it's got is this thing called a look at target. I've set it to the player capsule, but this camera, you could just call it game camera. You can change the look at target and everything will work however you want it to. So how do we get it to rotate around while maintaining that solid distance until a player says, hey, I want to zoom out more actually, or, you know, scrolls with their wheel, kind of like in World of Warcraft? Well, first we need to set a zoom level that the player can adjust. We're not going to touch it, but everyone knows how to adjust variables by now. We're going to set a public game object so that I can just quickly drag and drop what I want it to look at. We're going to need a vector 3 called target camera location. How is this camera location going to work? Well, if the player spawns at coordinate 50, 50, so he's right here, the camera needs to spawn also at 50, 50. Right? That's where all our calculations are gonna start. And then from that point forward, we're gonna take the angle that the camera is looking in all 3 directions. So let's say these are the X, Z, and Y axis. Which I've flipped them around a little bit here. And the player's looking down, right? At his ball friend. Well, the camera starts here, and before it draws the frame, the game calculates these angles and says, hey, that camera should be backwards, up, and to the left, and over here. So it'll spawn the camera looking down at the ball because it knows the angle that the camera's looking. So it's a really like fundamental camera. It's nothing that there's no like Unity built-in camera follow stuff or whatever. Unity has a bunch of built-in scripts that make things easier, but I don't like using them, and I don't think they're great if you want to get better at programming. So I like to do things the hard way, and then they end up actually helping out in the long run because you have more control over various aspects. So in order to do this, we need to talk about how cosine and sine work. So this is going to be like my primer here. Okay, so we have an axis. This could be axis F. This is axis G, right? We have an angle, which we like to use theta. So here's how cosine and sine work, because we don't need to use tangent today. If we were to take the cosine of this angle, right there, what will it give us? It will tell us this distance. Not G, because that's just the G axis. It'll tell us this distance, which we can call the width, let's say. And if we take the sine of theta, it will tell us this height here, which we'll call H. Okay? And so as this angle increases and gets closer and closer to looking straight up, the width, or the cosine of theta, gets closer and closer to 0 until it eventually hits 0. So let's say we made an angle that was straight up. What is this angle? That's a right angle. That's 90 degrees. So what is the cosine of 90 degrees? It happens to be equal to 0. What is the sine of 90? It is 1. Right? How can we use that to make a camera that can follow the ball? Well, it's kind of not too hard actually. I'm going to show you what it needs to do in game, and we're going to do it in a step-by-step sort of fashion of adjusting the camera's position till all three angles interact to adjust and help each other. It's not help each other is kind of a weird way to put it, but so what are we going to start with? I guess we'll just start with, I'll draw it in paint first. So we can get rid of these angles here. So if we have a ball, let's ignore, so we got two ways to rotate. Let's say we rotate around this y-axis. That's called yaw, which is easy to remember because it's y. And the other one's pitch. Yaw, pitch, and roll. Roll would be around the z-axis, and I ain't gonna fucking touch the z-axis in this game because I'm not making a flying game for now. So we're gonna be touching these axes, the y and the x-axis, because that's how you look up and down to see higher up, see higher down, or lower down, and how you look left and right in a game. And that's like WoW's controls right there. So let's start by looking straight down. So what are we looking at? We're looking at, this is our z-axis. Here's our ball that we've marked over here. It's actually should be more about right there. And then we got our x-axis here. So we have a camera back here. And if we look at, let's make one more axis here, real quick. What axis is this? This is going to be the y and the z axis. So if we look at this from the side, it's going to look like this. Right? It's going to be perfectly level with the ball. The camera's not going to be up here for now. We're not going to worry about that. Okay? So how do we want the camera to be acting when we look to the right? So when this camera is looking to the right, where does it need to be on this z-axis to use logic? So if I were to, let's say, just rotate this camera right now so that it was looking like this. Like this is how the camera looks, right? Where should it be on this z-axis? We don't worry about the x. It needs to be here, right? But we're worrying about the x because I put it over here. So where does it really need to be? The camera should be like this. Be just perfectly in center with this guy. But now that's not where it needs to be. It needs to be over here. Everybody knows that. So what do we need to do? When the camera is looking like this, it needs to be back here. That looks all good. We're all agreeing with that. But when it looks to the left, like this, we need it over there. So what is, how does it work with 90s? Okay, so since our zoom level is going to be 8, we have our guy here. We have a camera 8 units away, right here. When its camera's looking to the left, or to the right, excuse me, our camera's going to be over here, and this is going to be 8 units, right? So we need this thing, which if it was, let's just pretend this is 0, 0, right? It needs to be back 8 units when it's looking straight forward, and it needs to be at 0 units when it's looking straight right or straight left. Right? So as you rotate, the camera needs to adjust its Z and its X axis when you rotate around the Y. If we don't worry about rotating around the X axis just yet. Okay? So let's just worry about one of these axes, which is the Z axis. So we know that the camera needs to start here. We need to have it rotate looking to the right. I'm sorry, let me do it like this. When it rotates to the right, it needs to be able to move up to here, and when we rotate it all the way around, it needs to be over here. And at all points, does this need to make sense? When it's looking straight up and down, it needs to be at 8 units from the thing. When it's looking straight left or right, it needs to be 0 units. And when it's looking straight down at the thing, it's down, but it's not down. It's this way. It needs to be at 8 units from this as well. So how do we do that? It's actually kind of simple. So when we're looking straight right, like we said, or actually let's do straight up. When we're looking straight up at the thing, we have this angle of 80 degrees, of 90 degrees. Which one gave us 1 degree? When you take the... Oh, actually, this will be easier. Let's just do this. Take the sine of 90. Oopsies. You go 90 degrees and get the sine, you get a 1. Oh, got my neck. Hold on. Oh, I gotta crack my neck. Okay. If you take the sine of 90 degrees, you get 1. If you take the oopsies. Take the cosine of 90 degrees, you get 0. Or wait, you have to do 90 and then cosine. So that's how you can check if you ever want to use your Microsoft thing and you forget how these things work. I gotta take this off, man. I'm like, fuck. Whoops, I just knocked something over. Okay, swinging my sweater around. Boom, get that off of me. Okay, so that's how I like to remember, because sometimes I just fucking forget. I get all confused with this weird ass angle shit. I think this game uses the angle differently though. I believe the angle on this game is, and we could test this. I think, because this is looking this way, but I don't think the game uses that. But this is how you test. Okay. When we're looking straight up and down, what is the angle on the Y? It's 0. When we look straight to the right, it's 90. So it doesn't use that. Okay. Here's how I know it doesn't use that. It doesn't use the system I just laid out, which will confuse us. Okay. It doesn't use that angle. Here's the angle it uses. I just realized this. Okay. So we can't use sine in this scenario. This is the way Unity is calculating angles currently. It's using this one. If this is the z-axis going into the screen, and this is the x-axis, and you always got to confirm these things in game. When we're looking this camera straight out into the z here, wait, let me make sure. Yeah, because this is a positive z. When we're looking into the positive z, let's adjust this so that we don't have things fucked. And we rotate to the right, right? It goes, when we rotate it 90 degrees. That's the right. What it's doing is it's taking it and increasing this angle. And so when this angle hits 90, right? When we're looking straight left, the angle is 90 degrees. So what that means is we need to get the cosine or the sine of 90, we'll figure it out once we learn, obviously, to equal 0. And the reason why is because, and it is going to be the cosine in this scenario, because the cosine is the width of a degree, or like it's not the width, it's like the width of an angle kind of. In this scenario, Unity kind of, this actually confused me that Unity uses it this way, but it's whatever at this point. If you take the cosine of 90, you get 0. Unity flipped it, and I might just be tired, but the cosine of 90, if you just do the cosine of 90, it is 0. The sine of 90 is 1. And if you think of it in percentages, sort of, the cosine of 90 is 0%, and the cosine of 0 is 100%. So when this angle is at 0, or looking straight up and down, the cosine of this angle is going to be equal to the cosine of 90 degrees, which is going to be equal to 1, which is going to be equal to, quote-unquote, 100%. Which means that the distance that our ball and our camera need to be apart is 100%, right? Because we're going to be looking straight up, like this. So we need all 8 units. We need 100% of the 8 units to be applied in the distance. And when we're looking straight off into this direction, our cosine is going, the cosine of this angle, which is going to be this, is going to, the cosine of 90 degrees is going to be equal to 0. So we need this ball to be 0% off in the distance. We need a dead center. And the same goes for the other direction, except it will be negative. So we need it off on the top. So that's how the system's gonna work for that. And I'll show you it in action here so that it makes some sense. So first thing I'm gonna do is, I like to get this out of the way because I know I'm gonna add this anyway. I'll scroll up there? Yeah. That'll let us change the zoom level. We're not even gonna worry about it now though. Okay, so target camera location. This is where our camera needs to go to. It's a vector we made to keep things organized, and at the end of all of this, we're going to set our actual camera to this location, and we're going to do it like this: position equals target camera location. So what this says is whatever object this script's attached to, at the end of the update, I chose late update, obviously, to keep the camera updating last so you don't see any glitches. So at the end of the late update, the last thing that's going to happen is we're going to adjust this camera's position because the camera's an invisible object, so it doesn't need to be seen at any time, pretty much. So anyway, that's going to set it. So let's change our target camera location's Z coordinate. What is the Z coordinate? That's the one we were just working on here. This is the X. So as we rotate to the right, the camera needs to do this little motion. It needs to go here, and now we're looking at the right, and then when we look behind us, it needs to be up here. And so it's going to travel 8 units as we look to the right, and another 8 units as we look behind us. So let's get that rolling here. So target camera location is going to be, we're going to be changing the Z-axis coordinate, and it's going to be, first we're going to set it to our look at target, which is our player. We're going to first set it to Z, because if the player is 100 units off in the distance, we don't want our camera adjusting around the wrong area. We want it around the player's position. And then what we're going to do is, we have to do subtraction in this case. If I could do addition, but it would it'd be reversed. I'm not sure why. I originally tried addition. It kind of confused me a little bit. I think it has to do with the way the angles work in this. So, well, at least that's kind of making sense to me now based on how I'm seeing the angles versus what I figured they would be. So we decided on the cosine in order to get this to work. You have to multiply this by mathf.degrees to radians, and that's because so the cosine only takes radians in Unity, so you just have to do that. Okay. And then we multiply by our zoom level. So what is this doing? When we're looking straight to the right, this cosine of 90 degrees is going to be equal to 0, meaning our zoom level in the Z-axis needs to be 0. We need to be 0 units off in the Z-axis. And when we're looking straight at our target, when we're looking straight at him, it's going to be the math cosine of 0 degrees, which means we need to be 100% of our zoom level in the Z-axis. And when it's reversed and we're looking behind us, we need to be 100% of our zoom level, which is 8 units again, but in the other direction. And so when we put this into action and we try this shit out and we don't get any errors, oh god, no, because it's not too complex. We'll see what happens. Let's do some rotations. Ooh, look at that. And the camera is now looking back at the player. But you'll notice what needs to be done here to make this actually work properly is this camera needs to be off to the right here, right? We need to start working in the in the x-axis as well. We can't just play around only in the z-axis, right? So we're going to start working in the x-axis as well. So let's get that started. So let's take this same concept we took here, but apply it to a different part of the product here, and change our x-axis around. We're going to be looking more at the x here, so we need to obviously adjust our target location's x to the player's location x. And then instead of doing the cosine, we're going to be doing the sine here. So let's go sine of the y, because we're looking at the angle that we've rotated in the y-axis, right? We're going to use that same zoom level stuff. Okay, and then before we even start it, we might as well. So in this scenario, what we're doing is we got our ball, we got our z-axis. Jesus, what a fucking z. We got our x. So when the camera's right here and we rotate it, or when the camera's looking straight on, it needs to be just perfectly parallel on the x-axis. When we rotate the camera like this, too transparent. When the camera rotates like this, as it's rotating, it needs to move off to this side, right? Because if we have the z-axis done correctly, the z-axis is going to adjust it as we rotate to the right upwards. So as we turn to the right, it's going to, this camera is going to go off into the right. And so you'll see this, and I'll do it in steps too, just to show you how this kind of comes together so that it makes some sense here. Now let's do some rotating here. Take our camera and we'll rotate it. Oh wait, did I fucking... I think I just fucked myself here. Okay. Here. I mean, like, I actually made it work too well, I think. See how it's rotating? And it's going left and right on. It's only touching the x-axis, right? So when we look to the right, it goes to the left, and when we look to the left, it goes to the right. That's perfect. Now when we combine that with the Z stuff that we did earlier, just a little bit earlier, it comes together to make, and this music's perfect for this, right? It comes together to make something magical. The thing rotates. How does it do it? Amazing. But now we're gonna hit a road bump, right? Because of course everything's easy in 2D, but not in 3D, and this is where people would have troubles normally. So let's go make some trouble. We need to be able to do stuff. We've been rotating around the y-axis the whole time, but we need to be able to rotate around the z-axis. What axis is that? That is, the x-axis. I just said the wrong axis, Jesus. That's this axis, right? And you'll see what it looks like when I rotate it in right here. I'll grab this x-axis here. It's the up and down axis. Like, obviously we don't want to look above our character. We want to keep looking at our character. So when we rotate in the x-axis, we want things to look nice. So let's go back to this, and I'll show you how that's done. We're going to adjust using the same concept here that we've used with this left and right, up and down stuff. We're going to do it, but on a different axis. So we're finally translating into the 3D here. We got our Y, and we got our Z. Okay, we got our ball from the side, and we got our camera over here. When the camera's looking straight at the ball, like this, that's where the angle is, perpendicular. We got that angle of 0. Yeah. And when the camera's looking straight down, there's still transparent selection. Cool. So when we rotate the camera to look straight down, it needs to be directly above the ball. And that is regardless of how we've rotated on the y-axis. If you're looking straight down, you're never going to be off to either of these sides, right? You're not going to be over here, 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 here. You're going to be right above the ball. So we need this thing to go from level on this to max height. And the reason it needs to be max height is because when you're looking straight down, there's no situation where this won't be 8 units above the ball when you're looking straight down. No matter how you're rotated, you're always going to be 8 units. So this is like the foundation of all of our rotations. And that's why this one's actually going to be the simplest of all of them as well. And you'll see why. Because we're going to have to modify these other two now that we're being able to rotate in a third axis. We need to consider that other axis in our percentages, I guess, as I put it. So let's start modifying the camera location for the Y. We're gonna do plus, and I just know this works this way because for some reason this axis rotates the way I expect it to. Anyway, when we look down, you'll see on this, when we rotate around the x-axis or the pitch, when we rotate down, it goes towards positive 90. So that's exactly what I needed to do. Anyway, so what are we going to add to it? First, we're going to change the Y location to be where the ball is at, or the player, or whatever, because if the player's 100 feet in the air, I need my camera to start at 100 feet in the air before we start moving it. Then we're going to take our math F, and we're going to do the sine of the no, we don't even need the negative. Of the transform Euler angles, and it's going to be on the x-axis because we've been looking at the x-axis. So when we're looking straight down, we want to take the sine of that angle and multiply it by our zoom level. And the reason we're doing sine is because when we're looking straight down, the angle is 90, and the sine of 90 is 1. The sine of 90 is 1, so we need our zoom level to be at 100% zoom. So take the sine of the Euler angles, multiply it by math F dot degrees to rad. I always do it in the other order there. And then we're going to take this. We're actually going to end it there, but we're going to multiply by our zoom level. Okay, so that's perfect. So what is going to break on this? These two are going to break. These two lines. And you'll see it when we test it. And the reason why is because so I'll just quickly adjust the rotation first in the X. And you'll see that, oopsies, you'll see that it's doing the correct thing in the sense that it's going up, just straight up and down. It's not following the ball at all, by the way, because you'll know it's doing it the correct thing because it's 9 units and it started at 1 unit high. So it needs to be at a unit of 9, which is, if we were to move it over above the ball, it would be 8 units from the ball. And we were trying to keep our thing 8 units from the ball or the player or whatever, the capsule, at all times. So it's doing everything right there. But let's hit play one more time actually here, and I'll show you what's going on. When we rotate up to 9 units, and then when we go and we do a rotation around the ball, actually that's not that bad. I'll add in this part and you'll see. First, let's make it so the ball, because like, I guess what I was trying to say there is that it's not 8 units away from the ball, right? Even though it's 9 units high, it's out X units, meaning it's far more than 8 units from the ball, which isn't what we want. But on top of that, we also need it to actually move over the ball. So how do we do that? Because if you take this camera and you rotate it up 45 degrees, right? No, if you rotate it up, let's go even higher. Let's go like this many degrees, right? If you rotate it that many degrees, we can all see it. It needs to move forward a certain portion, right? Like right here, it needs to be moved forward this many degrees. But if we have a rotation in the y-axis, we can't just do that same move forward. It needs to be moved forward slightly less, and it also needs to be moved forward, or not move forward, it needs to be moved left and right in the x-axis when you have all these multiple rotations interacting with each other. So how do we solve for that? And that part's not too hard But basically, we don't need to touch this line. That's solid. Okay, we're gonna be doing some rotations on that x-axis, and what we need to solve for is how far in the y and how far in the x do we yeah, let's put it like this. I'll just draw it on this. When we have this camera rotated up at some angle like this, when we rotate our camera up to 45, right? So here's our beautiful camera. How far forward in the Z and how far left and right in the X do we need to adjust to get that bad boy to look back at the player, so that it doesn't end up looking straight down X units away, or looking over to the left of the or looking like over the top, or I guess actually it would be underneath. It's going to always be like underneath the unit, so it's not always just looking off away from the ball. So we need to adjust our X and our Z according to how far we've rotated around the Y-axis. That's how we find that out. And no, we already did that. We need to we need to adjust it based on how much we've rotated in the X-axis, because we've already made the script that makes us adjust our X and our Z, right? How far in we go and how far left and right. Now we need to adjust those one more time based on how far we've rotated in the Y. So what we do is actually pretty simple here. All we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the math f dot, is this one cosine of x, I believe? I think it's cosine. It should be cosine of x, yeah. Cosine of the transformed dot Euler angles dot x times math f dot rev. I think I should just copy and paste this portion. Oh wait, this needs to be in here. And what that does is adjust the percentage that we need to move over and down, just the proportion we need to move in the Z and then the X and in the X, based on how much we've rotated our camera up and down, right? So when we do this now, hopefully it didn't break shit. Look, this one works still, and to add to the suspense, this one works and now actually follows, but on top of that, we should be able to use this without fucking things up. Look at that. Amazing. Anyway, and then we should be able to zoom in and out, because if you remember, I added that feature in. And now when we rotate, it's still going to use that new zoom. I also added a move script, so you can see that like the camera will follow and there's no real lag between the camera and the player. If this wasn't in late update, there would be lag. So late update is crucial. You don't want that lag. And then one final feature that we'll add to the game just to make it that much better is, by the way, I'm not going to show you how to change the rotation because that's super basic. And it totally depends on your game. Some people will use mouse, some people will use keyboard, and you might want people to have the option to use both. So you're gonna, it's always going to be different. But you're just going to change these rotation values. And if you don't want someone clipping into the ground, that's like a whole nother episode, or that's just you saying, hey, don't let them look below, don't let them change the X to greater than or less than 9, and don't let them change the X to greater than 90, not 100, greater than 84. Like if you want someone to not be able to look more than this, you could just be like, hey, that's max rotation right there, you know. So that's how you're gonna get that to work. Now we're going to do one more feature, which is a nice little wow thing that I like. So we'll just say 6F. That's not the player height. That's gonna be actually the It's the height look adjustment, 6F. And so what this is going to do is we're going to say so now you'll notice a little difference here. So 6 is a bit much, but it won't be when I show you what we're going to do with that 6 here. So let's change this actually to like 4. What we're going to do is, the farther out you are zoomed, the higher above your character you're going to look. So what we can do is we can take our zoom level and divide it by 8 and multiply it by that height. So what that does is at max zoom, which we chose to be, well actually we'll make max zoom 15. So at max zoom, which is 15, we'll be looking at the maximum height above our character. And as we zoom in, the camera is going to get closer and closer to looking at the back of the character's head, basically. Or in this case, it's the body for some reason. I mean, I could just add up. I actually could just do this one. It's janky, you wouldn't want to do it like this, but anyway, you'll see here. So we're looking above our character, and as we zoom in, you'll see, actually in this case, I think it's the top of the head. It kind of like cuts into the head, right? Let me actually remove that 1 because I'll just add a 0.5. That'd be way better. Yeah, because it's starting at the center of the body, so I actually didn't need a full 1. So you'll see this will zoom into the character's head, the back of the head. So if you look right now and we zoom in, we're looking above our character, right? But as we zoom in, it kind of goes into the back of the head, just like in WoW. And so now all you guys need to do is add those controls, and you'll be set. Which I can't really see my zoom thing working here, obviously. Cool. If you guys want any more videos or whatever, just let me know. I can work on controls. Maybe like when you right click it'll rotate your camera and your player. When you left click, it just rotates the camera. Some really basic stuff. Make movement controls that follow the direction the camera's facing, you know, stuff like that. Thanks for watching. Sorry if it took really long, but I'm tired.